Mhm.
Awesome.
I figured it out.
Love it.
All right, well then I'll just say welcome again. And you know, one of the other things that is mentioned within this PowerPoint is there are more specific trainings that will be needed, especially for your staff that are working on different components. So certain items, even though we touch on them here, we won't go into detail, and we did that on purpose because, you know, at your level, you may not need to know everything about eligibility. You may not need to know everything about our IWID system, but certainly your staff will. So here's the agenda for today. First, I'd like to do an introduction so everybody on the call can get to know each other. Steve is going to help out with the WIOA eligibility. We're calling it the light version because we're not going to go into a crazy amount of detail. Nobody within this little network that we have right now is actually determining eligibility. I just want you to be aware of it so that way you have an understanding of the populations of youth that we serve, as well as for those of you that are performing outreach and recruitment services, which is African American Men in Unity and Boys and Girls Club, you have an idea of who you should be targeting for recruitment so that way they can potentially be eligible for the program.
Nice.
We're going to do an IWIDS overview. IWIDS is the database that we are required to use by the state that we put everybody in. They have a digital file, digital services, digital notes, everything is captured there. We're going to just briefly talk about the individual service strategy, which is the sort of living roadmap document that all of our providers use for each participant within the program. I'd like to give you an introduction to our network of providers that you'll be working with throughout the 3-county area. Talking a little bit about the referrals and forms. Those are the email that you received yesterday with the attachments. We'll go into that a little bit.
Right.
We'll talk a little bit about reporting, recruiting and outreach, and then what's next. All right, so let's see here. Okay, so just to dive right in, you all know me, you've been talking to me from the beginning. My name is Suzanne. I've been with Kane County now for over 6 years, but I've been with WIOA for over 10 throughout a couple of different counties, several different programs, several different populations. And I really like where I'm at now because I think I've had the ability to do the most in terms of, you know, impacting services and impacting participants. So I feel grateful that we have this opportunity because, like I said, this is new. So this has been really great for us all. Steve, do you want to?
Yes, I've been with the county now for 32 years, so I'm kind of the old guy here. I've done pretty much every job. I've started off as a youth counselor. Now I do eligibility and performance. I'm very excited about these new initiatives. I think it's definitely needed in our youth population. So I'm glad to have you guys aboard, actually.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, National Youth Advocate Program.
Sure. It's just a pleasure for us to be part of this group of community providers that are trying to create wellness for our kids in the community. My name is Vivian Gua. I am the Executive Director of National Youth Advocate Program in Illinois and also one of our corporate vice president. I've been with the organization for more than 6 years, and our drive has always been to partner with other community providers and make sure that we're actually targeting older youth and youth that have experienced trauma in the community and make sure that we're coming through for them in terms of providing services that actually helps them make something of their life and make better choices. So it's truly just our pleasure to be here, and we look forward to the working partnership.
My name is Shelia Owens. I am the Director of Program Development and Support with National Youth Advocate Program, Illinois. Thank you guys so much. We were excited when we even got the initial request for the proposal. It was really a joy writing and then learning more about the community that you guys are actually in and serving. And then being that we actually serve the population of youth that we're going to be serving, it makes me feel great that we can take the expertise that we have and expand it into other areas. For a long time, I've talked with, since we've been in Sycamore, I've talked with a couple of residents and then people that our staff that actually live there. And they were saying for so long they felt excluded from getting services for their youth and for their families. And so now that we're able to be in that area and actually do the services that we've always been doing here in Cook County, it just makes me feel good to know that we can touch these kids and also the families, and now they're feeling heard and they feel seen, and now they're being paid attention to. So that makes me feel really good. So thanks for this opportunity. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, African American Men in Unity.
Yeah, my name is Ricky Rogers, and I'm the executive director of the African American Men in Unity. We've been in existence since 1989. I'm one of the original founders of the organization. Our forte is rite of passage, leadership development, manhood training, life skills, and we provide youth with all the tools that are essential to help them to reach their full potential. And so we're excited to be a part of this new initiative. So thank you for inviting us.
Yes. Nice meeting you, Ricky.
Yeah, likewise.
I'm Dr. Hicks, consultant with African American Men of Unity. My role with Director Rogers is to make sure we're using the best evidence-based knowledge that we have in regards to youth development and youth training. We also specialize and have expertise in social marketing, and recruitment. So we're really excited about this opportunity to really help in our community, and particularly to strengthen youth of color.
For sure.
Thank you. All right, and then Boys and Girls Club of Dundee Township.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Drew Glassford. I'm the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Dundee Township. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was with another national youth serving organization, and just hugely passionate about creating awareness and success for our kids, and particularly those who come from under-resourced, challenged backgrounds and families. We've been in existence for 24 years. We serve 1,000 children a day at 10 sites, mostly elementary school oriented. However, middle school and high school, 2 of our sites are middle schools and high schools. And the real reason I took on this role with this organization was to really develop the final path and continuum for our program, which was success in careers and success in life once they graduate high school. And we just opened up in January of last year our high school program center. We had a small center that served about 50 kids a day. But we opened up a 30,000 square foot impact center at a school site right next to Dundee Crown High School that is entirely career pathway oriented and supporting kids that we know need mentoring. That have more complex challenges, particularly around trauma-informed care and social emotional supports. And that's really going to be the emphasis for that program. We were successful in operating it, even though it was open 6 weeks before the pandemic hit. But we operated a really successful summer jobs program, entrepreneurship program, partnerships with area businesses. And we see this opportunity as going even deeper into community partnerships. And I can tell you the reason we've been successful for 25 years is we're a very collaborative organization. We operate in schools. All of our partners are school districts with community partner organizations. And I'm thrilled with this group so far to learn who you are and your commitment and your experience and how we can all work together to make this successful. And I can't tell you how excited I am. 91% of our kids are children of color. 94% are free and reduced lunch Title I kids. These are the kids who need us the most. So thrilled to be working with you and with the Kane County on moving this forward together. Thank you.
Thank you. And something you said, Drew, is interesting because the youth that have the most barriers are really who WIOA aims to serve. So I think you kind of hit it on the head there.
Right.
So you know what? Oh, before I move ahead, I did want to mention too, just so everybody knows what everybody is doing. Your services just look a little bit slightly different. So just as an overview, being Kane County as the contract oversight, what we will provide is technical assistance, obviously, and guidance, just overseeing your performance, your expenditures, connecting you with the network, support in any way we can. NIAP will be doing mental health counseling, substance abuse counseling, as well as adult mentoring.
Yes.
And then both AAMOU and Boys and Girls Club will be doing adult mentoring and then outreach and recruitment. So that is something that was a little bit different that we built into both of your contracts, because we saw that the ties that you had to the community and your ability to already connect with youth that could be benefiting from our services really kind of, it should work both ways. So I think that that was kind of a natural fit.
Makes sense.
Now, that being said, of course, National Youth Advocate Program, if you, and we can talk about this offline, but certainly if you come across any youth that could benefit from services, you can be referring as well. It's just not something you're mandated to do out in the community.
Sure, sure.
All right. So, WIOA eligibility, the light version. Just a little bit of background on WIOA. I don't know how many of you are familiar with WIOA, or it's very acronym heavy background and the words that we use, but the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act has had several iterations. This is the latest one. And really the goal of the program is that it's designed to strengthen and improve our nation's public workforce system. It is funded by the Department of Labor, not the Department of Education. That is kind of a misnomer out there for people who know what WIOA is, because we are known for paying for training for individuals. And while that's a component of what we do, definitely the goal is always employment. It's always self-sufficiency. So a lot of the times we reach that through training opportunities, but really the goal is to make somebody self-sufficient within their employment. So we're looking to help get Americans, including youth and those with significant barriers to employment, into high quality jobs and careers, and help employers hire and retain skilled workers. So the network of providers that we have that we'll talk a little bit about in a minute, they're the ones that are subcontracted with us, just as you are, and they hold funds to directly serve the youth participants. So while all of their services are very similar in that, you know, they are mandated to provide certain things, some of them do serve either niche populations or they have specific industries that they partner with for employment opportunities. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. The main two takeaways from what the youth program does is employment and education focused. We can provide scholarships for youth to go to training facilities up to $10,000 worth to get either a short-term credential or a degree. And we have a state approved list that they have to pick from, but truly it's almost every single program at a community college that's within our area. And then on the employment side, we are looking at short-term exposures to different industries and occupations in the form of paid work experience. So what our providers do is partner with local businesses to be able to provide youth an opportunity to kind of test different things out and also give them some exposure so that way they can build a resume, because a lot of the youth that we work with have never actually held a job before. So it's very important to help them build those job readiness skills and get them comfortable with employment. So that way, when they go on to get an actual job, they're not fired day two because they didn't put their phone away or call when they were going to be late. So basic things that you and I may take for granted, but you got to learn it somewhere. All right, so the service priorities under our youth program, and this is nationally under the grant, is that we serve a majority of out-of-school youth. That's part of the eligibility, but what that means is that, as a simple definition, it's youth that are not currently enrolled in school or training of any kind. It could mean a youth that is attending a college program, but is on a semester break and hasn't signed up for next term's classes. It could mean a youth that is just finished graduating high school and doesn't know what they're going to do next. It could also mean somebody who is supposed to be attending high school and hasn't been for a couple of semesters. So I'm giving you a high level here just so you kind of understand where our priority lies. The other priority is work-based learning, and that's what I mentioned a minute ago in terms of one of the services that we provide. But what this looks like is paid or unpaid work experience, and we also look at a lot of the staff time that is spent dedicated to this effort as well. So these are two benchmarks that we have within the program, both in terms of enrollment and expenditures that our other sub-grantees are mandated to meet annually. I'm going to let Steve talk about general eligibility since that is his wheelhouse, if you will.
Okay. General eligibility is required for all kids who we serve. So every kid has to meet one of these benchmarks. They all have to be authorized to work in the US. All kids over 18 or males have to be compliant with selective service. And obviously, if someone who is over 18 and not compliant, you can help them register. So if they said, I don't think I want to register, then they can't be served. But otherwise, you can register them online. And they must be between the age of 16 and 24 at time of enrollment. Okay, Nick. And these are the barriers. So basically, if they meet that general eligibility and have one of these barriers, they're eligible. So someone who has the general eligibility and is a high school dropout, they will be eligible for our program. Someone who is low income, and low income is someone who's receiving food stamps or TANF in the last 6 months, or their family has been receiving. Someone who's living in a high poverty area. So right now, the city of DeKalb is considered a high poverty area. So anyone from that city is eligible or considered a low income individual. But there's also pockets within our community that are high poverty areas also, so they could be eligible that way. Next one is subject to juvenile or adult justice systems, and they don't necessarily have to be convicted of a crime, but if they're just involved in the juvenile or adult justice system and it kind of hinders them from getting employed or getting into education, they could be eligible that way. Next one. Anyone who is in the foster care system currently or aged out, they would also be automatically eligible. Pregnant or parenting, obviously only the females can be pregnant, but males for parenting, they don't necessarily have to reside in the household. So if they have a child, they would be considered automatically eligible too. Homeless. Homeless is a pretty broad definition. So basically, if they don't have a permanent nighttime residence, and they might be sleeping on someone's couch temporarily, either their relative or their friend, they could be considered homeless. Okay? Individual with a disability. So anyone, a disability, you guys all, any type of disability. This also occurs if they had any IEPs in the past. So maybe they're out of high school for 3 years, but they had IEP when they were in school. They're still considered an individual with disability. Because once a learning disability, always a learning disability. Excuse me. Basic skills deficient. So that's anyone doing reading or math under the 8th grade level. And we do that by testing them. So we test all our youth in TABE. So we test them in reading and math, and if they score under an 9.0, they're considered basic skills deficient. And the last one's required additional assistance to either find employment, keep employment, or get into education. It's basically pretty much all kids need additional assistance. But these kids also have to be low income. So they got to be low income and require additional assistance.
Right. And so again, we're giving you these without all of the tiny intricacies.
Oh yes, there's a lot more detail. But this is, like she said, this is light, eligibility light.
It is.
So obviously, the person who's going to be actually determining the eligibility has to get all the documents and verification and know the little details of each area Whereas you guys just need the basics so you can refer knowing that this person will be eligible.
And, you know, one of the things that I found with that is I think it's much more advantageous to actually only know the high level of it, only because there are, I don't want to call it a loophole necessarily, but there are ways of interpreting some of these definitions that the different providers are so familiar with, where
Yes.
they can get people eligible because of what they know, whereas someone who isn't as familiar might say, oh, well, that person's not homeless, but as Steve
Yeah.
mentioned, someone sleeping on a couch is considered homeless, so let's get them in our program.
Yeah, because homeless is a pretty broad definition. It's pretty easy to
Right.
hit. 'Cause
Correct.
the kid doesn't have a permanent nighttime residence.
Exactly.
Yes,
And that's actually, we got quite a few homeless kids in our program currently.
We do.
Yes.
We do. Just this morning, I got a referral from a shelter in Naperville, actually, for Wabanzi. So, and it really does hinge on, you know, your interpretation a lot of the times, and our providers are very adept at making sure that they can do everything they can to get somebody into the program.
And same thing with low income, knowing all the details on how to make someone low income really helps.
Right.
So, you know, if they're receiving food stamps, it's actually within the last 6 months.
yes,
So-
that is so true. Running a homeless youth program, we have kids that are couch surfing. They're
Yes,
homeless. They are homeless. So that is so true. Learning how to actually make sure that we're interpreting the rules.
so you
according
don't want
to-
to miss those kids who
Yes.
are couch surfing.
Yes,
So they can get these services. It is very
Correct.
important knowing the
Yeah.
little rules so they can be eligible to receive these services.
Definitely. Definitely.
I have a question. I noticed you mentioned, this is Dr. Hicks, about the military, that they had to be signed up for that.
Correct.
Yes.
So what, I guess my concern is, I guess this is all new. I used to work with WIA years ago. We talk about how old I am.
Well,
And
I've
that
been there
was
too,
when
so
we
I was probably there at the same time.
all see the program.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is new to me about this military requirement that they're asking for. And
Yeah.
so what does that mean when these individuals fill out this selective service application?
So
Does it
really,
mean-
any federal program to receive any federal funds, all youth above 18 or males have to sign up for selective service. So this doesn't just require for WIOA, it's also to get Pell Grants, to get FHA housing. Any
Okay.
federal program, you have to be sign up for selective service.
Okay.
But there is a way, if someone is over the age of 26 and didn't sign up for selective service, they can still get served if they were unaware of the law at the time. But obviously, all our youth are going to be between that age where they
They can still.
prior to
register.
26, so they would have to register. So it's not necessarily signing up for the military.
Mhm.
Just that the federal government wants to know if there needs to be a draft that they know where all males are between the age of 18 and 26.
Okay, because that may be, a concern for some of the youth. So I just need to be.
And there
more
is a few
informed of
youth
that.
who said, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So,
Right, so
and
I
then we
needed to
couldn't
be-
serve them.
Yeah.
But
so I
very
needed-
few. I think we've only had, probably in the last 10 years, 2 kids.
I was gonna say, it's been less than 5 ever since I've been here. I
Okay.
think I've only seen.
I can only remember 2 kids who
Yeah.
said, nope, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so for those individuals that are physically and mentally challenged, do they
Yes.
still they still have to fill that form out as well?
Yes,
Okay.
unfortunately. Obviously, you can give them accommodations in the system to fill out all the necessary forms that they need to fill out. So, but, we still require all the required paperwork for every single kid.
Okay, thank you. Thank
And
you.
same thing with the testing. So to see if their basic skills deficient, even if they do have a disability, you can give them a reasonable accommodation to assist them with that testing, but they still have to test.
All right. So
And-
our overview of IWIDS is going to be incredibly brief, even though that is misleading, because really those of you that are, or your staff that are using this system, will be in it probably almost every single day. This is just a little screenshot at the bottom to show you what the front page looks, or the home page I should say, but it stands for Illinois Workforce Development System. And there's two main areas that users will access for this program. And those are called case notes and then services. Case notes are literally notes that you're making about the case. So you're entering information at a very objective level about what you and the customer did, talked about, what services you provided, updates. And we have entire trainings, not only on IWIDS and using the system, but also on these individual components. So Steve and myself have conducted separately, I can't even tell you, Steve does this all the time,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, but trainings on
Actually,
how,
I enjoy it.
it's not the most fun system. It does what we need it to do, but case notes and services are really the two most important things. Services are something that we will, again, go over with you more in depth later, but that is capturing in real time the actual services you are providing to the individual. So for example, adult mentoring is an actual enrollable service, and you would be opening that on the day that you started mentoring with the person, and you would be closing it on the day that you have finished mentoring that individual. We do need to figure out which other services are applicable to you, because using adult mentoring as an example, there is no adult health counseling or mental health counseling or substance abuse counseling service. So we have to look at the services that we do have available. We don't make them up. The state makes these services and then provides their definitions for them. So we have to kind of interpret the definitions to see what's applicable to what it is that we're doing with the youth. But we will give you all of that. And there's no, need to worry about anything beyond what you're responsible for, because you're working within the same case file within IWIDS for the individual that the service provider, the youth provider, has created for them. So when you go into a record, you will see all of the services that have been provided for that individual by their case manager, and you'll be entering the ones that are applicable for what you and your staff are doing. And then same thing for case notes. You'll have the ability to see what's in the system. You won't have the ability to modify anything that they've created, but you will have the ability to add or modify any case notes that you're entering into the system. And
Hey, Suzanne?
really, yes.
Suzanne, just a really quick question on that. Because, particularly as we're developing our mentoring resources and our forms and system and process in that, are we able to upload, support documentation to the system? I know it's might be a nuts and bolts question, but I'm just curious.
Yes.
Right, we can, okay.
Yeah,
So,
you
I
could
don't wanna-
upload like the basic documents needed for eligibility into the system. So it probably would, if the kid had those documents, it would probably assist them once they do start applying for the services. If
Steve?
you have their birth certificate or whatever you need to verify those general eligibility items, you could upload the documents into IWDS.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful for compliance. I'm thinking too for case notes, particularly that case notes, because from an administrative perspective, if we got notes in our system and our forms, and then I just don't want to, I'm trying to mitigate duplicating.
Unfortunately, with case notes,
yeah,
you probably would not be able to upload the case notes. Some people can cut and paste them in there.
Yeah,
You would have
okay.
to create a case note.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Okay, got it.
Mhm.
Sorry, that's a little in the weeds, but I'm just, as we formulate our strategy with our staff, I need to know
Sure.
what's transferable versus what do we have to do that's specific to your system. So thank you.
No, that makes sense. And that's a good point. I think, Steve is right about the case notes. A lot of people will cut and paste the content in there,
Okay,
especially if they have a different area that they're used to writing them in. But unfortunately, they're required in a very specific section and way in the
Okay.
system itself. So we'll show you what that looks like. And then maybe you can kind of strategize a way that best serves your team.
that's a great point. That's what I was thinking, is if it's very specific to this, then we should take that format and use that in our strategy so that it mirrors, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, one thing, well, a couple things I'll say on this. The first thing is that the state is so picky. They're so picky, unfortunately, about how things look and then how things are reflected and the wording that's used. And I don't mean to say that you need to be nervous about how you're entering things in terms of like your verbiage. What I'm saying rather is that things need to be accurate. So for example, if in a case note you say I am doing adult mentoring with Steve, but then there's no service for adult mentoring, they will pick up on that. And they'll say, they'll have a finding saying, you know, you said over here that you were going to be giving adult mentoring services, and then over here you did not. Wrap it up in the case note, you know, connect the dots, close the loop. We'll get to all that stuff later. I guess my whole point is that really in IWIDS, especially with having access to these two components, you will be responsible for maintaining that documentation.
Got it. Thank you.
And one thing I was also going to say, once you identify users that you want to access the system, all you have to do is email me, and I just need their phone number and email address, and I can create a user account for them.
Right. So one of the things that I'll do after this session is send out kind of an overview email. I'll include the PowerPoint presentation for all of you. If I can figure out the recording, I'll provide that to you as well. And within the email, I will put what we need for access to IWDS for your users. So that way you can, and as your staff gets added, because we have new staff added all the time across the network. So it's not like it's due on the 1st of the month or anything. It's just as needed. Let us know. We will get them in the system.
Awesome. Thank you.
Nice. And then, you know, as mentioned here, and as I've said a couple times, we will have an in-depth training. So this is a little overwhelming that it's just one slide, but I'm saying so much about it. Truly, it needs its own session. So, you know, once you have staff identified, you know, for yourself to be familiar, if that's something that you'd like as well, whomever can participate, we will walk you through it, you know, step by step.
Makes sense.
All right. Any questions about IWIDS or to come, I guess? All right. All right, so the individual service strategy, which we call the ISS, I told you there were a lot of acronyms. I know that everybody kind of has their own version of this that's titled a little differently. A lot of times you'll hear IEP for individual employment plan. You know, we also use IEP with the school system for something different. The ISS, though, is a document that's required by the program for all of the youth. And as it states here, it truly is a roadmap to capture the participants' plan for the program as it changes. So it started at their initial assessment with the career advisor from their program, and they are identifying, right? They're identifying their goals. They're identifying any barriers that they might have to employment or education. And, you know, it could be an eligibility barrier. It could be something else as, you know, like I don't have access to transportation, or I am food insecure. You know, it could literally be anything. And everything that we want to document goes into this plan. The case managers are required to revisit this every 30 days. That's not a requirement for you guys because they're not your clients, even though they will be in different aspects, but because they belong to the providers, they're the ones responsible for that. And then it also documents the program activities and services. So this is another one of those compliance areas where it needs to speak and be consistent with IWDS. So, you know, as before I mentioned, if you capture in a case note, Steve needs adult mentoring, but it's not a service, that's a finding. It's the same thing with the ISS, unfortunately, where if you are writing in the ISS, I really think Steve could benefit from adult mentoring, but then it never comes to fruition. You're going to have to document why, because they're going to pick up on the fact that you said Steve really needs adult mentoring. So I'm telling you all of this because I would like the providers to give all of you the ISS for the individual that you will be serving through your respective services, so that you have an idea of all of this information, because it's important that you know their goals, their barriers, their plans, what they've participated in already, what they hope to participate in, where they live, family size, all that stuff is relevant to what you're doing. So now, I will be completely transparent with you. We haven't worked out all of the details in terms of, are you adding to the ISS, or is it just there for your information? One thing I can tell you is that any services or case notes that go into IWIDS are supposed to also be on the ISS. So that's where Steve and I are trying to figure out, like, okay, well, how do we, do that? Because there can't be a living document with two different providers. But we have had our youth service providers quite frequently, to be honest with you, share a placement, meaning that, John over here could want a program that only one provider has access to, but he started over here, so he's going to work with both of them to accomplish what he needs. And that's kind of how I see a little bit of what your services are doing, because they're working over here with their provider, but then you have a specialized service that they're going to be working with as well. So we'll get the details figured out, specifically with the ISS, but I just want you to know a little bit about this document, so that way you have some understanding of the information that it provides and how it can assist you. Are there any questions on this one? This is a big one too, I feel like. Good. All right. All right, so I'd like to provide an introduction to our network. I don't know how familiar you are or are not with our service providers, but currently we have 7 within the 3-county area. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about them. And then what I'm going to do for you also when I send this follow-up email is include our marketing flyer. I know within the RFP, there was a description. I actually think the flyer might have been copy pasted into it if I'm thinking back to it, but just so you have it for multiple reasons. 1, marketing. 2, you have all the contact information for the providers, and then 3, the details of what they provide. But to give you an overview here, and this is just alphabetical, so there's no rhyme or reason otherwise to how they're presented, but business and career services is actually physically not within our area. Their office is in Wheeling, they just moved, but they serve northern and southern Kane. So specifically the Elgin and the Aurora areas. So Boys and Girls Club and African American Men in Unity will be talking offline, because one of the requirements that we actually have for BCS in the new program year is to work with you guys on recruiting pipelines, because their program needs it. They are severely lacking in terms of the youth that they could be serving and that they have the capacity to serve. But their program is probably one of the more specialized that we have within our area. They work with youth for manufacturing. They have what's called the Manufacturing Careers Internship Program. We call it MCIP for short. And they work with older youth, so ages 18 and up, just because of the nature of the industry. And they have what they call a boot camp for these individuals when they start with their program. It's a job-ready time frame, I should say, where they, for 4 weeks, work incredibly intensively with the youth and everything that they need to be job ready for a career in manufacturing. Shop math, they get an OSHA certification, they get a forklift certification, they go on tours of different facilities, and then at the end of that, they are matched with a company, and they do an internship for about 12 weeks. It's completely paid, it's full-time, and it's immersive. So they go straight from the boot camp into employment, and then quite often these youth are hired on permanently by the employers once the experience ends. So it's intensive, it's really, really great. And one of the things that I really like about their program is because manufacturing is a rather forgiving industry, they see a lot of success with justice-involved youth, as well as youth with certain disabilities. I think I'd like to preface that by saying, for example, we've had a couple of youth that are high performing on the autism spectrum that do very well in manufacturing because of the expectations of the repetitive, always knowing what they need to be doing on the job, being a little bit more solitary. It depends on the individual, obviously, but this is something that we've seen a lot of success with. They need help. They need help getting kids in the program. Central State SARE, Jobs for Progress Inc., we call them SARE for short, that's kind of what they go by. They are downtown Aurora on River Street. They are actually in Waubonsee's kind of backyard, so they work pretty closely together. But SARE is unique in that they have a full-time educational coach on staff that works with youth that need their GED. So they serve a ton of youth that we see coming out of the Aurora area that either dropped out of school or were unable to finish for some reason. And the educational coordinator that they have on staff truly is excellent. We actually made her full-time this year, which was a big change for us. We went from part-time to full-time with that individual because we saw the need. I mean, Steve can attest to this. I think something like 50 out of 55 kids within their program are pursuing their GED. So
they got a high percentage of kids who are going for their GED, definitely.
Yeah, so AAMOU, I'm looking at you guys because I think that you will probably be working very closely with them in terms of the youth that you might be referring to them. I could see that, you know, kind of being in your area. Elgin Community College, we have all 3 community colleges for the 3-county area within our network, which is a really great thing. One of the things that I like to kind of point out about ECC is that they have a job developer on staff that is just so in tune to what the youth want to do. I mean, she goes above and beyond to find organizations, companies within the area to provide super unique job experiences that get the youth excited about working. And that is so important, especially for the kids that are like, I could go to Target and make $14 an hour. Why do I need your program? Well, it's because you get to work in an art studio and you love art. So it turns out you might be a great fit for this career. I mean, they've gotten youth permanently employed at Sherman Hospital because of the agreement that they have with them. They also work with the animal shelter. They really do. They do a great job of helping youth explore their career interest and then really assisting them on that pathway. And one thing that's important to note about not only ECC, but then the next provider that's on this list, which is the Grundy-Kendall Regional Office of Education, is that they are the only 2 providers within our network that hold in-school funds, which means that any youth that are currently in school, whether it's high school or already attending training at a post-secondary level, could be eligible for their program for services. Otherwise, like I've mentioned, you know, anyone that is in school is the priority in terms of our service numbers for the network. The Grundy-Kendall Regional Office of Education is located in Yorkville. And they do a really, really great job of working with youth, I think specifically, and this kind of happened by accident, but youth that have an IEP. And this kind of came about because we used to have a provider within the network that was a special cooperative organization, and they dissolved. And Grundy-Kendall was already working with a lot of youth, obviously in the area that had barriers of different types, but then they ended up absorbing all of those participants and forming relationships with all of the schools in the area as well in Kendall County. So kind of by happenstance, they serve a lot of youth that are either in transition programs or coming out of transition programs from the high schools, as well as kids that have IEPs. So, you know, that's not to say that they won't serve anyone, but that's kind of one of the things that they do very well at. Before I move on to the other providers, are there any questions about these 4? Okay. All right. Kishwaukee College is unfortunately our only provider out in DeKalb. So we rely on them very heavily, and they do a really great job of working with the youth in that county. And they just kind of by nature of being the community college in the area, serve a lot of youth through training. So they do a really great job of ensuring that youth have all of the supports necessary to accomplish their educational goals. And of course, they have the work experience component as well. So they've been, as of late, trying, you know, kind of extra hard to form relationships outside of the college to provide different types of opportunities for the youth when they're looking at work experience. Parents Alliance Employment Project is our newest provider to the network. They've already been with us a couple of years, but we are very excited to have them within our network now because they serve a very specific population. They are located at Delnor Hospital, which is rather unique for a program, and they only serve youth with disabilities. Excuse me, and the youth with disabilities that they work with are youth that require intensive assistance. So this is not someone who is high functioning. This is someone who really truly needs the guidance and the support of somebody who understands what they require to be able to be successful on the job. And what they do with the youth is they have 3 rotational internships at the hospital in different areas. So everything from, you know, front of the house hospitality in the cafeteria to they actually just added the maternity wing to their services. They do a lot of work in the new mother wing. They have a surgery wing I know that they do work with. I mean, they're all over the place. So that way the youth have the opportunity to explore different areas and gain transferable skills for when they're placed in permanent employment outside of the hospital when the program ends. And their goal is to have every single youth employed in unsubsidized jobs when they finish the program, which is really huge, as you may know, for anybody that has a disability. So we are very lucky to have them on site because they were really filling a need that we had, quite honestly. And then last but not least, we have Waubonsee Community College, and they're located at the Aurora location. I know there's several different Waubonsee locations throughout our area, but they're located downtown Aurora, which is really great because they have formed so many unique relationships with all of the different organizations, schools, everything within the community. They are looking to ensure that any youth with any type of barrier in their area knows that they can come to them for services. So they've been really kind of hitting the pavement to get that message out there. And again, being a community college, they do a lot of occupational training, but as of late, we've seen a lot more youth that are looking for skills training in terms of job readiness. They do a ton of work experience both in and outside of the college, and also GED. They do GED as well. And they work with Sarah on that to see where it's appropriate for the youth to participate in, but they do a lot of that remediation as well. So that's our network. And one thing that's interesting about this coming year, you know, you guys just went through the RFP process. That will be their reality next year. So that means that, you know, it is competitive procurement to be, you know, a provider within the network. And about mid-calendar year of next year, they will be, or I should say mid-program year, not mid-calendar year. So around January, February is when we usually put out the RFP. And then we invite, you know, not only the existing network, but obviously outside entities to apply for services as well. So that'll determine our following year's providers. All right. Okay. So next we have referrals and forms. And I had mentioned within the email, I'm not going to put the forms up on the screen, so hopefully you have them available, but regardless, I can, you know, resend them, because one of the things that I wanted to do is, these are drafts in my eyes. You know, I think that there are decent drafts, but certainly I would like everybody's feedback on whether they work for you, what's missing, you know, what can be taken off. You know, I was trying as best as I could to think through the process and how it might work and what you would need and what the providers would need in order to make these forms usable. So just to go through them, we'll start with the WIOA services referral form. And what this is for is any referral coming from you to a youth provider. So this is for use with any youth that are not yet WIOA participants. So like if you have, you know, Bobby walks in your office and you're like, I would love to work with you, or maybe you're not even really going to be using our services, but you said you want training, you know, through Waubonsee, and I think that, you know, you would probably be qualified for this grant to assist you with that, with those funds. Let's see if, you know, you might qualify. You would be using this form to send over to Waubonsee. So this is coming through outreach and recruiting efforts. It's also coming through, you know, any organic interactions that you have with someone that you think could qualify. As we talked about earlier, try to ensure the basic eligibility. Again, we're not putting it on you to, you know, gather all the documents and check all the boxes, but at the very bare minimum, we do need to be sure that they're between the ages that our grant serves and that they can work in the United States. You know, honestly, even selective service is something that the providers, they'll have to verify that. So if you forget to ask them about it, it's not usually something that casually comes up in conversation, to be honest with you. That's completely understandable. But at the very bare minimum, you know, if they say, oh, well, I'm 26, well, okay, then you're gonna be something, or you're gonna be of the age rather, that might qualify for a different program we have, which is the adult or dislocated worker program, but not youth. And we can have a separate conversation about that. So that way, if anyone comes to you that fits into those categories, you still have a way to refer them to the program. One thing I would like to mention is we do not have residency requirements for our grant, meaning that they do not have to live or work within Kane, Kendall, or DeKalb counties. So one thing I will share with you is that we give priority of service to those youth when it comes to training funds. So if you had somebody who lived in like McHenry, but was willing to work with us because it was just more convenient, that's totally fine. We welcome their participation, but if they do pursue training, their grant cap would be $5,000 for training scholarship instead of $10,000. Other than that, there's really no detriment other than they would just have to commute to us wherever they choose to work. You want to, on this form, indicate what type of services the youth is interested in. And really there's two. It's either training or work experience or just help finding a job. And what I'd like you to do is use this synopsis, which is kind of in the middle towards the bottom of the page, to give a little bit of background on what the youth is looking for. Again, you know, you're not doing a full assessment, but if the youth comes to you saying, I think I'd like to do, you know, some type of training for medical, like maybe phlebotomy, I don't know, I think that I've heard that that's pretty good. You'd want to put that here. So that way the provider has an idea of what type of conversation they're having with the individual. You also want to include any information that you have been made aware of, such as barriers that the youth may have, or as I mentioned, their identified goals, but their barriers will help the provider get them eligible and know what to ask for in terms of documentation or just any services for the grant. So for example, if they have mentioned that they're justice involved and they say, well, yeah, I have a felony background, but then in the same breath, they say, I'd really like to be a nurse. Well, right then and there, the provider knows that they're going to have a conversation with them about expectations, because depending on their type of felony, they may not qualify to become a nurse. So I don't want to get into too much detail. You don't have to have their life story here, but it really helps lead the conversation for the case manager that you're referring them to if you're able to provide this. The youth does not need to sign off on this referral, but please ensure that they understand who will be contacting them and what the next steps are. I can't tell, I'm sure you all have dealt with this 1,000 times, but you get a referral, you send a referral, and then you call them and that person's like, who are you and why are you bothering me? And it's like, oh my God, they didn't tell you I was gonna call. And then you feel silly, they're annoyed. It's just, it doesn't work. So please, please be sure, to tell the youth, Johnny's gonna call you. Here's what he's going to say. He's going to talk to you about the program, and then be sure that you also let the other person know, he's expecting your call. And there's actually a section on here. Do they prefer phone or email contact? Please don't call his cell. His mom monitors his phone, email him, whatever. But just so that way we can be as respectful to the youth and their time as well. And then when you send the referral form over to the provider, copy me on it, please. I would like to be able to, track the referrals and also ensure that they're being followed up on. And that's something where I'm looking to you as well, because one of the caveats on here, and it does say it at the top, within 24 to 48 work hours, that provider needs to contact the youth, or at least attempt. Obviously, you can't guarantee contact, but they need to attempt. And if, 4 days go by and then Johnny calls you back and says, no one's called me, I want to know about it, because there's two sides to every story. I'm not blaming anybody, but I need to follow up and find out, what slipped through the cracks. We need to make sure that this is successful. And if you are unsure where to send the youth, call me. This happens all the time. Sometimes it's easy. They live in DeKalb. Well, they're going to work with DeKalb because it's the closest provider to them. But if they live in Aurora, if they live in Elgin, if you're not sure what the best provider is, let's have a conversation, because sometimes it really comes down to what type of services they're pursuing, and then it becomes a little more clear. There's been other times where I've said, have the youth talk to both providers and make the choice. It is participant choice. And if there are multiple providers that could give them what they're looking for, they're free to make that decision ultimately. Are there any questions about this particular form? So I did a really great job in creating
You did. You did. You did. It makes sense what you're explaining. Having worked on previous programming that looks very similar, it makes sense. So thank you for taking the time.
Great. No, I'm glad to hear it. And you know, as I mentioned, one of the things I'll be looking to you for is your feedback, and I'll give you a week to do so. So, you know, by mid next week or so, on all of these forms, I'll be asking for your thoughts, your feedback, because I'd like to tweak them and make them as final as possible before we formally launch them with use within the network. Because, you know, some of these forms are going to go out to the providers, obviously, for their referrals to you as well. So I just want to make sure they're conducive to everyone.
Yeah, that was my question, was timing too, Suzanne, but I
Yes.
really, you know, appreciate your insight into purpose, and then, of course, making the youth aware of it. It's critical. So,
Yeah, yes,
you know,
it is.
that's that
And,
enough.
you know, and also I'm aware that your contract started 2 weeks ago, and here we are having our first conversation. And I know it's taking a while to launch things, as any new program would, but certainly I don't want to hold back anybody that could already be working with your program. So we can talk about that a little bit too, in terms of, you know, if a youth tomorrow comes to one of the providers and says, I think I would like, you know, mental health services, I don't want to wait for the fact that this still is a draft to get them over to you. You know, let's get started, and then we can amend some of these as need be. If, of course, if you're all okay with that.
Makes sense. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
great.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the next two forms are honestly pretty much identical, other than the fact that they just have different titles. This is the mentoring and mental health referrals. And this is what the providers will be sending to you to indicate what type of services they will be needing or that they're referring them for. You know, just as a little side note, I did play around with whether or not I should have a third substance abuse form. I kind of felt like maybe that was duplicative. So, you know, Nayab, you can tell me whether you disagree or agree with that, but I felt like maybe if they used the mental health form and then in the synopsis specified that they were looking for substance abuse counseling, that kind of went hand in hand with mental health anyway. I hope I'm not
Yes.
oversimplifying.
It
Okay.
does. It does. It makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So then we'll just be sure to clarify to the providers that they would want to do that as well for that form then.
Correct.
All right. So these look pretty similar, honestly, to the other form in that they are indicating for you which eligibility barriers the youth may have. They are also providing that ISS, that individual service strategy document to you. That being said, this is not meant to be like a, here's the form, go on your way. I fully expect that the case manager will want and should have a conversation with you as the service provider to kind of explain a little bit more about why the referral is being made. You know,
Yeah.
that being said, they are required to put a synopsis in here as well as a case note in IWDS that you can view. You have that right to view it. That will state what it is that they're looking to have you provide. You know, one of the nice things about the case notes too is that it truly is like a record of everything with the youth. So you'll be able to read from the very beginning, eligibility determination, all the way up until current date, what services are being provided. I find that that gives me a lot of insight into the individual's situation as well as services, and hopefully it will for you as well. Now, one thing I'd like to note about any of these forms, especially the synopsis, is please don't do anything to reveal confidential information that the youth isn't comfortable sharing. And I think as providers, you're probably familiar with that, where I don't need to, you know, go into too much detail, but it can look different for different people. You know, one youth their pregnancy might not be public knowledge. They may not want you putting on here that they're pregnant. For somebody else, they might be, you know, 2 weeks along and be shouting it to the world, and they want you to put it on here because they're going to be needing some services for that. So it's a conversation that you need to have with the individual, but please don't reveal anything that they're not confident sharing on their own. Now, on these two forms, the youth does need to sign off, indicating that they're aware that the referral is being made on their behalf, because this is more specific than just like someone's going to contact you to see if you want to go to training, right? This is you are being referred for mentoring services, mental health services. So they do need to be aware of that, and the youth does need to sign off consenting to that. And then once again, I'm just asking the providers to copy me on the email that's being sent out to you.
Hey, Suzanne, since we're serving 16-year-olds, do we need parental as well?
Steve, what do you think? I think you're on mute right now. Wait, Steve, you're on mute. Okay, well, I can't hear him. I will follow up with him.
Yeah, I'm wondering about, since it's particularly for the mental health. I think the mentoring employment, but the mental health might be the one where we might need, because that's obviously a deeper area, and there tends to be more HIPAA around that.
Sure.
Right. I don't think HIPAA applies to workforce or mentoring, but I believe that it does for mental health. So we'll just
I think you're right about that.
I'm sorry, I did have my thing muted.
I was
We
like, I
do
see you
require
talking.
everyone under 16 or under 18 to have parents sign off on all forms.
All
So
forms.
you're right.
Okay.
They will have to have their parents sign off on even the referral forms.
Okay, so I will add that. Thank you. I will add that to all the forms.
You bet.
Okay. Thank you.
I can tell you bet, Suzanne, as an overview, I mean, I like these a lot. I really I think they're, I especially like the brief synopsis, so we get a sense of it, but it's not a ton of detail, right? Because obviously we're the ones that really need to dig into it if it's based on our specialization. I like that. And then identifying, multiple qualifying factors. I mean, I feel like you've really grasped everything that's most important here. So they look really good to me.
Good. Well, I appreciate it. And certainly I think that there might be things that come up later that we didn't anticipate, where it might be particularly useful to have a different type of information. So, certainly these are not ironclad. We can be halfway through the program year revising them. So just continue to let me know how they work for you after we do finalize them.
That's great.
All right. The next form we have here is the consent to release information. Now, this form is only required and then therefore applicable when previously obtained documentation by the WIOA provider may be pertinent to adult mentoring and or mental health services. So, excuse me, this actually came up because Vivian made a really good point to me where she said, can the providers be giving us documents that they have like school records or juvenile justice information? And absolutely they can if they have it. And one of the things that I shared with her at the time is they may not have this information because they may not need it for what they're doing with the youth. So, certainly like if they have a school IEP and that was used for eligibility, then absolutely they have that document. But I can tell you right off the bat that there's like a 99% chance that they have no school records otherwise because they don't need it. They've never had it. They don't ask for it. It's not required unless, of course, the individual was going through training under our grant, and then we would have those school records. So it might look a little different, but anything that they have that is applicable to what you're doing, they should and can be providing you. So that would be what this form is used for. So in that case, the referring provider, so the youth provider, will indicate which barrier is applicable to the individual, and then again, use that synopsis to provide a little bit more information. Once again, we do need the signature of the youth participant. These are their forms. So they need to be the one saying, yes, I consent to providing, AAMOU with my juvenile justice information because I understand that it is pertinent to the services that they'll be providing. Now, this form also can be used in reversed, as I have mentioned here. So for example, if you obtain documentation regarding an individual's medical records, just as an example, that you believe impacts their WIOA performance, then you should be providing it to their service provider, their WIOA provider. Again, it's only if it's necessary. So like, let's say, for example, you're working with the youth and then they become, they're involuntarily committed. You know, they're going through so many struggles that their parents, you know, put them in a facility, and you have knowledge of this and you have the forms for that. If they consent, that is something that you absolutely should be providing to their WIOA provider, because not only does it impact their participation, it actually is stopping it essentially. Like they wouldn't be able to participate because they're committed in a facility. And then the provider knows what to do. We actually have a service for holding. They can, you know, kind of freeze them in the program, if you will, until they're able to come back and participate. Obviously, this pertains to so many other less serious cases, but you know, certainly if you think that something is necessary for the provider to have, you can be using this form for that purpose as well. Once again, I would like to be copied on the message. One thing that I have down here, and I will hyperlink this for you, so when you receive the PowerPoint, you can click on it and it'll go right to the policy. It's this tiny little guy down here. Any confidential information must be sent in a safe, encrypted way, such as a password protected email. Another thing, and Steve, can you just confirm this for me? You could upload it to iWiz, and that way you don't even need to send it because you're putting it right in the system.
You could upload it to iWiz, yes.
Fantastic. So, you know, you receive that paperwork saying that they've been committed. You're sending an email saying, you know, here's the consent form. I'm putting it in iWiz for you to view. Then their provider can go and look at that. When you click on this hyperlink here, it will take you to the DOL page. The TEAGL, that stands for Training and Employment Guidance Letter. And that's something that the state, Steve's nodding because like I remember the acronym.
Yeah, that was good.
They issue these as guidance and policy for all WIOA, everything WIOA in every way you can imagine for us to be following. And this is specific to personally identifiable information, which is PII. We take it very seriously, as I'm sure you all do as well, being in these professions. So certainly if you ever have any questions about PII, you know, Steve has an entire presentation on it that we have forced the providers to sit through multiple times. Because like I said, we take it very seriously. We don't want anyone's information out there that they didn't consent to or in an unsafe way.
Yes, obviously the federal government is very big into PII to make sure it is protected at all time. And we definitely want to make sure that we protect all their information, their personal identifiable information, definitely.
Yeah, as we would want someone to do for us.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Okay, so reporting. Now, I have to confess to you, I don't have a ton of detail for you on this. This is a work in progress for me, but what I can share with you is that monthly reports are always due on the 5th for the previous month's activities. Obviously, come July 5th, no one's gonna have anything to say because we're getting started. We're launching, we're doing the best we can right now to get everything underway. However, what you will see on these reports is referral numbers. You'll see the services provided. You'll be indicating, you know, all of these things. You'll be indicating iWiz activity and also progress against benchmarks. So I have a template. Actually, NIAP was kind enough to share with me what they're looking at using, and I actually think it might work rather well. Excuse me, I think we might just need to tweak it a bit, especially for the other two, because you'll be doing outreach and recruitment activities. And so part of that will be based on the plans that you have for those activities and how you are measuring against them, especially the timeline. So we'll work together to create these. You know, don't feel like you have to submit anything until we get them solidified, only because right now it's more about getting the program underway, you know, getting staff on board, training, onboarding, making sure everyone is comfortable. You know, like I said, certainly if we have youth that can benefit from your services, I don't want to hold back in referring them to get them started, but I do think it's important to get all these foundational items in place first.
Thank you for that, Suzanne.
Definitely. So fiscal, we call them cost claims. They're monthly invoices. And this is what you will be submitting to be reimbursed. As you saw within the RFP, we work on a reimbursement basis, meaning that anything that you are being paid for is a reimbursement for the services that you are showing documentation to support that were provided. So they occur monthly. And any charges that you are submitting must align with everything that was within your budget and budget narrative. So, you can't submit for a staff trip to, Cancun because you did training down there because it wasn't in your budget narrative. So you probably should have put that in your budget narrative, right? You'll know better next time. But
why not?
I know, right? Like that's the best place to get training. But they do a very good job, our fiscal team. You've had some slight introduction to Maria Gonzalez because she was the one that processed all of your vendor paperwork. But one of the things that I will do after this email is send out a message copying Maria and having her individually reach out to you and your fiscal team. So,
Yes.
I'm not intimately familiar with each of your organizations to know, but my guess is that you have a separate individual that works, in billing or invoicing or right, fiscal matters. So she would want to know and be introduced to that person because they're the ones that need to understand this process. So she will work with them on getting acclimated to our monthly cycle, as well as what we require in terms of supporting documentation. And she's flexible too. She mentioned to me, do they want me to create a cover sheet for them or do they want to just submit? And I said, I have no idea. You talk to them and see what works. So she'll be working with you to hopefully streamline that process for each of you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Her and her team, she also has Maribel and Diane on her team. So, whether or not you're working with all of them, you will absolutely become familiar with Maria. And she's always available if you have any questions, finance related. All right, so recruiting and outreach. Now, this does pertain mostly to Boys and Girls Club as well as African American Men in Unity, but certainly, Nayib, I'd like you to kind of hear what it is they're going to be doing because, as I mentioned, while it's not in your contract, certainly you are welcome to be referring individuals into the program as well. So what the two of you will need to do is develop a plan, and this was mentioned within your contracts. In terms of, we're calling them designated touch points for outreach and recruitment of youth, time-specific deliverables, as well as specific organizations that will be engaged. And a couple of the things that we'll be looking for are the organizations appropriate? So for example, if they're all schools, how are you ensuring that the youth that you're recruiting are out of school individuals? Are you working with the transition coordinators? Are you working with the advisors? Are you, having conversations with graduating seniors? What does that look like? With local community-based organizations, are you targeting specific populations, homeless youth, pregnant and parenting youth, justice-involved youth, whatever your strategy looks like, these are the type of things that we would like to see captured in this plan. And what we'll do is create reporting elements off of your plan, as well as benchmarks for deliverables. And, I don't think, just so you know, and you don't go too crazy with it, I'm not looking for specifics like, month one, and I take this back actually, because really it's completely up to you on what this looks like. This is new to all of us. So if it works for you to have monthly deliverables, that's great. I think in terms of what I will be also assessing is quarterly. So quarterly, how many youth have you reached out to, been able to make contact with, successfully referred over, and then how many of those youth translated into actual enrollments, which is mentioned here. That's important. If you have referred 50 youth and not a single one has followed through, we need to be understanding why, to make sure that this is a productive relationship for not only your time on this project, but also for the providers, because no one likes to follow up with 50 youth that really want nothing to do with their program. So does this make sense?
Yes.
Both of you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And definitely the quarterly benchmarks.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think that, one thing that I've at least found with our existing provider pool is having benchmarks not only holds people accountable, but it gives them goals. And it's hard to know how many youth and what type of activities you should really be structuring your day around if you don't have a goal that you're reaching for, whether that's 50 youth contacted, 20 youth, follow through, 5 youth get enrolled. Whatever your goals look like, 20 organizations you're cold calling, 5 you're having intimate conversations with, 1 you're having an on-site presentation, 3 you're doing Zoom. Whatever that looks like, we just want to have some definition around it so that way we can be discussing whether it's working or not.
This is good. Very concise, but effective.
Great. Okay, good. And, I'm sure that we'll be revisiting this once they're developed, certainly, but that's something that I would like you to be working on. And I would say it's the 17th right now. My goal would be if you could have something of a draft by, I don't know, maybe end of June might be too soon for you. You tell me. Otherwise, I would be looking at the very latest, like early to mid-July for a plan, just so we have a plan.
Yeah, mid-July would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot. End of June and July, everybody's taking vacations right now. So
yeah, we get that. Okay, so we'll look at mid-July for that. Ricky, does that work for you?
Yes, it does. Yes,
Okay.
they give us ample time to come up with a strategy and plan.
Great. And one thing that I actually really appreciated about your proposal, Ricky, is that you had a lot of that defined already. So I'm hoping that for you and your team, you're able to kind of work with some of the elements that you had present and maybe just redefine them a little bit.
Yes, thank you. Will.
So a brief note, and this is just for total transparency with everyone, we're new to this. I mentioned this at the very beginning of the call, but we very much expect to be in constant communication with you. We're checking in often, we're fine tuning our procedures. Don't ever hesitate to reach out to me, to Steve, to me, because really we are building this, right? And one thing that I want everyone to be aware of is the reason that you are all here is because it started last year, last program year, and then really hit kind of a nexus, if you will, was COVID. And we had so many conversations with the providers about what do you need? And a lot of it came out of not just COVID, but COVID funding. We had specific COVID funding where we were able to purchase kind of unique items for our providers to, help them be successful remotely and, work in a virtual fashion with their participants. But out of that, we had a lot of conversations about what do you need? What are you seeing? Where are the struggles? Where are youth not being successful? And over, we kept hearing they're not healthy. They're not thriving. Youth are losing confidence. They don't have the adult figures in their life that can assist them and guide them, through everything, really, from the most mundane of daily interactions to really important decisions. They don't feel empowered and they're suffering. COVID put such a strain on the mental health of all of the participants within our network, and we have support service dollars available. We've been fortunate that we actually, ECC, out of all of the providers, has had someone on staff providing mental health services to their youth for quite some time, but it is it's limited because they don't have, that's not what their program budget is set up to do. It's a very, kind of touch and go scenario, like, okay, well, you can have a couple sessions with her, but then we have to find another way for you to access it because that's just not what the program is funding, essentially. So when we have these conversations, that's where we realize that outside entities that specialize this were needed. So I can't tell you, I know you all expressed your excitement at the beginning of this. The providers are like tenfold. They're so excited to have you here. And and I'll just jump to it, our next steps is we need to introduce you to them. So, as I mentioned, we will send out the fiscal email and I'll get you acquainted with Maria and her team, and then you can, introduce your fiscal side to them as well. But we need to have a formal introduction to those 7 providers that I gave an overview of. So what I'll be doing in the next week or two, and just to give you a little background, I try to hold quarterly meetings with the providers. And, obviously it's been virtual as of late. Hopefully we'll get back in person at some point. But we hold what we just call a quarterly meeting, and we go over policies, procedures. We introduce new people that have joined the team. We talk about updates. If there's an RFP, sometimes we have conversations about that. But we talk about everything that's related to, the grant, the services, the youth, what they're seeing. what's needed, etc. And what I'd like to do is use our next quarterly meeting to introduce all of you and launch the program. So that way they can begin the program year, which starts July 1 formally, with an understanding of who you are and what you're doing, and they can begin using it, you know, hit the ground running. So I'll schedule that. I always like to give a couple weeks notice for that, because we do tend to take at least like 2 to 3 hours for this session. Usually it's like a whole morning. So in doing that, I don't want to spring it on anyone last minute. So I'll probably be looking at like kind of early mid-July for that as well, especially after the holiday, definitely. But just kind of, you know, have it on your radar that we'll probably be doing that, and that way we can get you introduced to everyone. And then, you know, similarly, if you are hiring staff, please make sure, as Steve mentioned, and I'll put this in my email just to remind you, that you are providing us with their information so we can get them into the IWDS system and get them set up with the user account so they're kind of ready to go. We'll also need to create those outreach recruitment plans. We just talked about that. And then obviously beginning and receiving referrals. And then the other thing that we'll do is we'll start planning some of these more in-depth training sessions. I suspect that that will be probably more once you have your staff on board. So knowing who will be providing the services and needs to know IWIDS, you know, needs to know the case notes, the services, all of that stuff, that's when we'll schedule that, because, you know, that's something where if we can kind of get as many people into it as possible on the front end versus providing like 10 separate sessions, that would be particularly helpful. So let me actually throw that out there. Does anybody either know or have staff identified, or a timeline for hiring staff? What does that look like for all of you?
Sure, I'll go first. In the next 2 weeks, we should have our staff lined up, so.
Great.
Yeah, we're in the same boat too, Suzanne.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
good.
but
The African American Men in Unity, we are in, you know, we have hired some staff, and we're looking to hire a few more people.
Yes.
That is fantastic. I am so happy to hear that, you guys, that you're like on it and you're already,
Yes.
that's huge. That really is, because I am not intimately familiar, but I'm familiar enough with how long that can take. So I appreciate, you know, you getting on that and getting them on board, because that will help us launch this all the sooner.
Yes.
All right. So
Yep.
I have for you here our contact information. Don't worry about writing it down, because I'll send this out to you. But just so you have our emails, our phone. We are also located, because I don't think I've mentioned this quite yet, at the One Stop Center, which is located in downtown Batavia. And we are actually right next to the library, which is like my favorite thing. So we are down here. We have the One Stop Center is a conversation to be had another day, but basically it is the coming together of all of our partners. And there are a ton of different services that are available to the patrons that are able to walk in. So we can talk about that another time, because I know that they would probably like to have their own introduction to you, but just so you know kind of where we're located and what we do. And then I also have on here, and I'll hyperlink it when I send it out, but we do have some social media, and I love to share information on behalf of all of our providers and community partners. So if you ever have like a marketing flyer, an event, you know, even just whatever, like share it with me, tag us in it, like whatever you want to do, because that way we can kind of get the word out. You know, that we have these services available. Here's who you are, here's what you're doing. I try to do the same thing for all of our providers as well. Oh, and you know what? I just opened the chat, and yes, I will absolutely email you this. I will do my best to give you the recording, and thank you. I appreciate your feedback. You know, certainly this is a lot. So if anyone has any questions after the fact, I feel like I've been talking the whole time, so I apologize. You know, please feel free to send me your comments, your feedback, your questions. That's something that I always welcome, because we can't, you know, improve or add services or get better in any way if we don't know what's really going on. So.
hey, Suzanne, just a quick one about social media,
Yeah.
because in the agreement, the contract agreement, it says that any press release needs to be approved by your agency. Is that also regarding social media posts, you know, posting on LinkedIn or Facebook about the program, or are you good with us?
No, go forth.
Okay.
I do not want to be in the position to individually approve you every time you put something on Facebook.
Yeah.
Trust
Well,
me.
including being awarded this contract, right? And the term, you know, you're
No.
okay with us posting that on LinkedIn or?
That's
you
a
know?
that's a great question. It's actually public knowledge because all
Yeah.
of our board meetings, committee
Okay.
meetings are public. So
Okay,
yeah, that's a great question, but any minutes, outcomes, action items, all of that is public knowledge. It's on our
Okay.
King County page, accessible to anyone. Oh, on that note, anybody is free as a member of the public to attend any of those meetings. We do
Okay.
have a committee that I meet with fairly regularly within the program year. They're all so excited to have you on board. I should have mentioned that as well. So, certainly feel free to share that information.
Okay.
Let's see here. Is it
Just another point too, just regarding roundtables, I think I would find it very valuable to be able to do roundtables with the other youth mentoring groups, with our staff, to have our staff roundtable with your staff, and we can figure out a frequency on that. But when we talk about, right, improving outcomes and supporting each other, I'd really like to make this a collaborative around what they're working on and specifics and how we can become more effective together.
Yeah.
And then of course,
I concur.
Yeah, great idea, Drew. We would want to be part of that process too.
okay.
And then of course we need to have numbers, email, so we can definitely have a line of communication so we can all be abreast of what's going on and how
Correct.
challenges or effectiveness or things that we need to refine, and that'll be great.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, are we going to have, when you think about roundtables and workshops in this collaborative between us, even to do a couple in-person gatherings, would be great, right?
Yes.
You can do that now. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would love that. Whether or not, Steve and myself are actually involved, or if it's more between, you as the experts, I'll leave that up to you. I think that that's a really great idea, especially because you want to be on the same page with how you're approaching things. Obviously, you have your own way of providing the services, but in terms of, consistency and what an individual could expect, whether they're coming to the north or the south area, is important, I think.
Yes.
And then another note that I made myself, because I thought of this the other day and I wanted to write it down, is a contact sheet with the information of everybody in the network. So not just, the main contacts, which are on that marketing flyer for the program providers, but also like the case managers, just because you may need to know who the specific case manager of an individual is if you're working with them, rather than, just the head of the program. So I can create that, absolutely. And then I'll be adding to it as you hire your staff.
Sounds great. Exciting, very exciting. Thrilled to be working on this.
Nice, nice.
I agree. So in terms of the roundtable, I'm going to put that on you guys. Once I send out this contact sheet, and you already at least have each other's emails just from the messages that I've sent out, but feel free to engage each other, and whatever level of involvement or non-involvement you want me to have, I'd be happy to comply with that. So just keep me posted. And I think that's everything that I have. But like I said, if you think of anything after the fact, feel free to reach out, certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll be following up with probably more emails than you care to receive. So
That's okay. This was really helpful.
Yes. I think the communication up front is very needed. Once we get going, it might decrease, but I think this is excellent. Thank you so much.
Agreed. Well, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Correct. A pleasure meeting everybody.
Nice to likewise. Great meeting everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.